Ladies and gentlemen, men and women of Terra, Australis, welcome to the Great Aussie Shite Show. This is the layman's guide in order to interpret and hopefully for you to beat the system. I am Gregory Stewart, the author of Australian Night Discovery, and I'm here to take you for a continuation on my experience in dealing with these people who purport to have authority. I've had a lot of support through the TikTok channel, thank you very much. A lot of the comments have been very, very kind. Thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate it. And I'm guessing there's a reason that you're here, and that's because you know that there's something definitely wrong with the men and women who sit in our parliaments, courthouses and police stations. We know they don't work for us, and well, we shouldn't be working for them. Who are these people? It's very important that you really start looking into who these people are, who they're working for, and what they're actually doing to this country. Now, believe it or not, all politicians on this country are doing a fantastic job. They really are. You see, their job is not to work for me, it's not to work for you, it's not to work for us collectively, it's to work for them, themselves, their family, their own interests, and the people who control them, their masters. And unfortunately, the public servants have made themselves public masters, and us public masters have now become the public servants. So hopefully we can get you off that citizenship and return you back to land. If you've read my pinned post, it's basically my experience in dealing with Victoria Police, their allegations in relation to a speeding offence, and also my interaction with the courts themselves. Now, if you've read through that pinned post and you've seen all the emails and you've seen the attachments that were added in, you'll basically have a good understanding or comprehension, should I say, in relation to what it is that I actually did in order to test the system. So I got a speeding fine and then went through a heap of emails and communication, tried to establish an open communication line with these people. Now, if you've read the post, you'll see on November 2020, there was some communication in relation to a number of questions that I had for these people. You see, one part of testing the system and doing your due diligence is collecting a lot of information and doing your research into laws, legislation, these types of things. And it really is something that you need to pay attention to. You know, we are all brought up as believing that you don't talk about politics and religion. And unfortunately, those two pillars of society are the main two pillars of society that impact our lives every day. Okay, so we need to start breaking it down to find out who these people are and what they're actually doing. Now, so this is the second video, and I'm going to go through with you tonight some of the reference material that I use and some of basically the information. Every time I've been into a courtroom, I've taken this stuff with me. Now, I'm just a novice. I have no legal training whatsoever. I'm a law-abiding, peace-loving man, so it's very rare that I have to deal with any sort of a policeman and or a court. I like to keep my nose clean. I like to be able to live my life in peace. But as we've seen over the last few years, the people in our parliaments, courthouses and police stations have really taken it upon themselves to really, get into our family homes and our lives. And, they're really starting to dictate way too much. So they're giving themselves powers they simply do not have. And they're using their own false justifications in order to get these things in. Now, there's a due process that they haven't followed. Now, in order to get an understanding or a comprehension, a basic comprehension of who these people are and what they're doing, you need to start reaching out and having a look at a lot of different information. Okay, turn the idiot box off, fire up your computer, and start looking into these things. Now, what you're trying to do, if you have to go into a courtroom, don't go in empty-handed. Do not go in empty-handed. You see, the first things you need to look at is, first of all, the language that they're using against you. Okay, I covered this in the last video, but I'll just touch on it again now. Basically, there are two English languages that are running side by side. We are effectively in, because of this Uni-Droit agreement that Gough Whitlam brought in 1973, we're essentially in a Roman system. And what they've done is they've set up our education systems to teach us to speak in a certain manner. They've said that this is the way that we speak English. And then what they've actually done is, because we speak in a certain manner, they've set up a separate language using the same terms and things that we comprehend in English. And what they've actually done is they've put their own spin on it. Okay, so when a policeman or a judge or anyone official from the government is talking to you, they're actually talking a completely different language. And what you need to do is get a comprehension of the words that they use, and then start learning how this language applies to you. Believe it or not, language of the living is what we're using and what we believe everyone's using, and what they're using is the language of the dead. Okay. In the last video, we touched on the hierarchy of controls, basically, of laws, legislation, corporate policies. So laws for men and women, legislation is for corporate entities, and then you've got corporate policies. So the policies of a corporation in relation to the men and women that work there, they're bound by that. So let's have a look at some of the things that I've been able to gather together. So as you can see on the table here, one of the greatest resources that I've been able to come across is Dick Yardley's book, Australian Political Treason, Treachery and Sabotage, which he's actually updated the title of that. Now, I'm not sure if he's added the content because this is the only the copy that I've actually got. I didn't buy the updated version, but the updated version that you'll get is Australian Political and Religious Leaders, Treason, Treachery and Sabotage. Really good quote on the back there by Sir Harry Talbot Gibbs. One of the things that really made me think, this man, Sir Harry Talbot Gibbs, okay, according to Dick Yardley, wrote a letter, and this letter was basically to the men and women of the courts. And part of that letter, in one small section, he's quoted as saying, "I, therefore, have come to the conclusion that the current legal and political system in use in Australia and its states territories has no basis in law." They're not my words. Dick Yardley tells us that it's Sir Harry Talbot Gibbs who states that. There's a lot more in there. This thing here, this book is a wealth of knowledge. I really highly recommend that you get yourself a copy. Okay, you can Google it. It'll take you to the links, and you'll be able to have a look at all the information. It goes through, basically in the first half a dozen pages, it'll go through what happened at a particular period. This is sort of concentrating around about the 1973, the Uni-Joint agreements, and it's just got so much information in there, and it really cuts down a lot of the bullshit because it's providing you not only with all that, but it's full of evidence. Go and have a look at this book and grab yourself a copy, and this is part of you doing your due diligence. Okay, now with something like this in your hands, you've got just cause, which means the system itself is living in what you might call doubt. Okay, you would have often heard that they look for reason beyond the shadow of doubt. They're looking for whatever it is that brings something into fact, and in order to be in fact, it needs to be beyond that shadow of doubt. Well, what this is doing is bringing the entire system, the Australian government and all other state territory governments, into question. Okay. If you've read my pin post on my Facebook account, Gregory Stewart, you'd also find attached a link to a document which is the 1855-1856 Victorian Constitution. Now, this is when, obviously, before Federation, as the people in WA would be well acquainted with, constitutions of the states can actually go back long before Federation. Okay. Now, I did actually get myself a copy, as I've added a link on there for you, and one thing that really got me was the word treason. The amount of times treason is actually listed in that document is unbelievable. Then you look at things like the Crimes Act 1914, and it does state on there something to the effect that if you're found guilty of treason, the consequence is death by hanging. Okay, I just want to put that into your head there because, yeah, as far as I'm aware, I can't find anything that successfully repeals that. Okay. Battling these people is by arming yourself with information. So when you go into a courtroom, you should also get yourself a copy of the Holy Bible, the King James Version, 1611 edition. The 1611 edition really does make up part of the foundational framework on which this country is bound, okay, of what this country stands upon for a civilized society, okay. once you start getting into all this sort of stuff, the collection that you get is quite big. But I'm not asking you to go buy every book out there, but some of the books that you really should have on you when you're going into a courtroom, this is certainly one of them. You see, back in I'm not sure exactly when it was that they took these out of the courtrooms, but from, I'm going to say the 1950s and below that, it was basically every time a magistrate or a judge walked into a courtroom, they had a copy of this with them, okay, because it's a reminder to these people of why we're here and what happens next, okay. They no longer have this in their courtrooms because they no longer represent God, common law, or anything to do with law for men and women. Okay, they're administrative courts only. They're sitting illegitimately, is what I'm trying to tell you. That's all men in our parliaments, courthouses, and police stations. Okay, my whole point with the entire process that I went through, as I said in the last video, you've got to really try to make your mind up as to how you want to fight this. Okay, you can go into the system. Their Roman system is stacked. Okay, so whatever it is you're charged with, there's probably half a dozen things that already override that. Okay, so if you look hard enough in that bullshit system, then you'll probably find something in the system that gives you a good standing, okay, within the courtroom, I guess you can say. If you're going to go into a courtroom, I've heard from a number of people one of the best ways in order to get a favourable judgment is to get the magistrate or the judge on side with you. So basically, all your questions are directed at the prosecution, the police prosecution. Okay. Now, please keep in mind, one of the questions you should be asking those guys is, what formal legal and/or law education do you have and training? Okay, because if they're just basically members of a corporation like Victoria Police Corporation, then they're just a plant. They're just a bum on a seat. Okay, and they're there to do a job, and that job is to basically make sure that you're guilty, and they get to steal your money. So, the more information, the more things that you're able to collect with you, take into a courtroom because it's basically giving you a foundation upon which to stand. Okay, when you go into a courtroom with things like the Constitution, they're going to deny you the Constitution. Okay, I've got a copy of the annotated Constitution of the Australian Commonwealth, quick and Garran version. This document, it really is mind-boggling for me, this document and this book. It's the commentaries, it's a brief history of what Australia was like before Federation and after Federation. You've got the annotations at the back. And one part of what makes a law is the intent behind it. Now, the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act 1900 UK is proclaimed and gazetted on the 1st of January 1901. Basically, this document doesn't really give the men and women of this country rights as such. There's probably, there's only a few, there's 3 or 4. One of them is you can have a trial by jury, you can travel amongst the states. Section 92 states something to the effect of on the imposition of uniform duties of customs, trade and commerce and intercourse amongst the states, whether by internal carriage or ocean navigation, shall be absolutely free. Okay, now page 845 is where you'll find the annotation on that one. That's a beaut. One thing I do want to tell you is this. When you get to the preamble, I mean, the first three words sums it up. On page 262, the Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act, the first 3 words pretty much sum up the entire document, which is whereas the people. Okay, whereas the people. Now, the people, who are the people? It doesn't say anywhere here, whereas the government. It doesn't say whereas the courts or whereas the Bar Association or whereas the Reserve Bank or whereas the ATO or any other criminal organisation. It says whereas the people. Okay, that's the first 3 words, whereas the people of New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia, Queensland and Tasmania, humbly relying on the blessings of Almighty God, have agreed to unite in one indissoluble federal commonwealth under the Crown of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and under the Constitution hereby established. Now, there's one part here that really gets me thinking, which is part 5, which states, "This Act and all laws made by the Parliament of the Commonwealth under the Constitution shall be binding on the courts, judges, and people of every state and of every part of the Commonwealth, notwithstanding anything in the laws of any state. And the laws of the Commonwealth shall be enforced on all British ships, the Queen's ships of war excepted, whose port of clearance and whose port of destination are in the Commonwealth." Okay, but it's the first part there. "Shall be binding on the courts, judges, and people of every state and every part of the Commonwealth." Now, this is binding on all men and women, okay? So I've got to take note of this. I have to take note of this because there are many people in this country that see that as being binding on all men and women of this country, okay? So if we don't fight for it, no one else will. But when a judge turns around to you and he says something along the lines of, "I'm not prepared to hear any constitutional arguments in my court, and if you do so again, you're going to be held in contempt, do you understand?" First of all, you can say, "No, I don't understand. I believe that is complete and utter nonsense and absolutely repugnant and abhorrent to all things that I believe are law." And the reason I say that is because of the double standards which seem to be operating on this country. And if he asks, "What are you talking about?" you can actually replay a video, which I'll reshare that on my Facebook page. And that's of Brett Sutton. And you'll find him saying something to the effect that in relation to the court officials and the MPs, major parasites, not members of parliament, the major parasites and the court officials gave themselves authority not to be part of the program, okay? They forced it into your veins and gave themselves protections. And what protections did they have? Well, according to Brett Sutton, something to the effect of constitutional and other legal impediments prohibited them from getting these.
Watered down its mandatory vaccination directions. I understand Commonwealth employees and court staff are exempt from the mandate.
Oh, yeah, that's not a watering down. It's specific advice, legal advice, and supported by the Solicitor General that there are constitutional and other legal protections for some of those groups that mean that a mandate was really not a recommendation for those groups.
And does that apply to MPs too? I mean, are those of state MPs in the parliament?
Yeah, I believe so. Again, legal impediments or legal recommendations that MPs can't be within those mandates. That's not to say that there aren't other mechanisms for MPs to be managed, but the Treasurer can speak to that.
So to clarify, that is no longer, MPs are no longer part of the public health order?
No, MPs have not been part of the mandate for legal advice around that. But as I understand it, not required for MPs in Victoria as well.
It as vaccines, okay? So if they're going to hide under constitutional protections, where was yours? Whereas the people binding on all men and women, okay? There's so many different ways to go through, but basically, my whole point of the entire thing was to challenge their authority. They've made this claim just by wearing a uniform and sitting in a court that they're lawfully commissioned to do what they're doing. I don't know that. I'm not going to believe it. I don't need to believe it. I want to know. I want to stand in the know. Okay, so when it comes to who these people are and what they're doing, just provide something that should be readily available and easily accessible. It's not a hard question to ask. So bust out your 3 forms of identification, which you'll find the 3 forms that I need on that pin post on Gregory Stewart on Facebook. And yeah, you'll be able to ask the same questions. You need to know who these people are. That's the first step. Before we get to the matter at hand, I need to know who you are. Okay, so whether you're dealing with police or corrupt courts or any other government department, I don't contract with your corporation. I do not recognise you as having lawful authority. I now require you to bust out your 3 forms of identification. And you don't let them go past it, but you have to try to comprehend. But because these people are stupid, dumb and dim-witted, you have to repeat yourself 3 times minimum. Okay, 3 times. So get that going. Okay, read my pin post again for the 3. It's a long read. I know it's a long read, but it might give you an idea of the difference between the language that I'm using and the language that they use. and hopefully be able to start making some sense of and putting it all together. But yeah, this is only the second video. Obviously, this is going to take a bit of time to break it all down. But have a look at the emails in 2020, November 2020, and start gathering your questions. What paperwork do you require to make sure everything is lawful? Okay, now something else I take into a courtroom with me is my folder here with all these downloads and so forth. And one of them, which is really fantastic, is the 1988 Constitution Commission report. And when you read through that and the conclusion, you'll find that they've been operating illegitimately for a very long time. This is not something that just crept up overnight. This is something that's been going on for decades. Okay, and slowly but surely they've been implementing this system of destruction. So when you find yourself, having a sook about how high the petrol prices, you go to the supermarket, $100 doesn't even get you a little cart full. The amount of crap that people complain about every day, all of this is simply orchestrated and manipulated by the people sitting in our parliaments, courthouses and police stations on behalf of their masters. Okay? Why does it take two people to pay off a home loan over the period of 30 years when in the 1950s it took one man to have a job, the wife stayed home, looked after the babies, and, they had one car and they were able to pay off the house, go on holidays. In this day and age, you've got two people busting their ass trying to pay for everything, and still at the end of the week, what do you got left? Sweet FA. And what you do have left, they're trying to fine you or toll you or finding some other reason and excuse to steal your money. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. Look at the TikTok, hit a like, share and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Southrock Productions, that's where all these long videos are going. So get on to Southrock Productions, have a look at the video. Don't forget to leave a comment. And for anyone that wants to support us out there, my book, Australian Night Discovery, is available on amazon.com.au. And for all the men and women in the United Kingdom, it's at barnesandnoble.com. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Till the next time. See you at the Great Aussie Shit Show.
Great Aussie Shit Show. Great Aussie Shit Show. The Great Aussie Shit Show.